Hello, sloppers. Welcome to Idyl Slop. I'm Idyl, and this is my slop. By the time I post this video, there should already be a video on my main channel talking about what should happen to dead MMOs. And in my opinion, a big thing that would be great would be private servers that are officially supported. Basically not having to do crazy workarounds / crimes to run private instances of these games that we love so much. And in that video, I also mentioned the fact that something was just announced by the Old School Runescape team. That thing being Project Zanaris. Project Zanaris, or community servers as they're calling it, is basically a way for players to rent servers from Jagex, which is just a snapshot of Old School RuneScape as it is today, and then you can change the rules around. You can do things like region locking your content, like Swampletics, the most famous region lock of all time. These servers would be either open to the public or private, and you could just have a bunch of friends on there and doing whatever you want to do. And understandably, this has come with a lot of concerns from the player base, but I've been a huge proponent of this idea vocally on my own YouTube channel, posting a video talking about what I called official private servers for RuneScape that did almost exactly what they're describing in Project Zanaris. And also as someone who's made a lot of RuneLite plugins like Prop Hunt, which is basically just adding mini games inside of RuneScape, I feel like I have a unique-ish perspective on this whole situation. So I just want to talk through the pros and cons of it all. First off, I do think that the creativity that this enables for the player base is the biggest pro of them all, because I've always said that the Old School RuneScape player base is the most creative there is in the MMORPG scene, and it even rivals some of the mainstream games, like maybe not to levels of Minecraft, but that's a sandbox game. It's totally different. So I think enabling that is just a good thing, but also the fact that it's private servers means you can do things you ordinarily can't. Like, for example, this $50,000 charity event that I took part in with Hanani, where she had 100 content creators doing a charity event to raise money for suicide prevention, would not have been possible without a Jagex provided private server, because it required extremely boosted XP rates and then some challenges, and you also obviously wanted it to only be these 100 people. Normally, like I said, you need Jagex to provide a server for you, but if community servers are an option, anyone could do something like this. Maybe for charity, maybe not. Maybe it could be more like the Battle Royale that Eevescape does almost every year. This is another event that wouldn't be possible without Jagex providing servers, because it requires a completely isolated RuneScape map. But you could even go further than the Battle Royale idea, because you have access to drop rates, XP rates, and region locking, and even more, and hopefully more in the future if the idea goes well. So with this already, you're seeing how it enables ideas and creativity that are currently not available to people right now. Even with the use of RuneLite plugins, it fills a different need. And this is all just showing examples of what the community has already done. It's not even talking about what they could do now that they'll have new tools at their disposal. Yeah, it's going to be great for content creators specifically, like that. No question, it's going to be awesome for content creators. But I do think that clans and just small Discord groups and streamers could have a lot of fun with it too, with their communities. It's enabling a level of creativity that not only RuneScape hasn't seen before, but no MMORPG has seen before. And that's something I also want to talk about. The fact that this is all kind of an experiment for the MMORPG industry. RuneScape was, as far as I know, the first, but if not one of the first, to ever bring out an official version of an older version of the game. They did have RuneScape Classic back in the day, but bringing back 2007 era servers while RuneScape 2, which would eventually turn into RuneScape 3, was still going strong, might be putting it a little too kindly, was a big deal. And as you can see, they ran a poll for it and everything, which I actually think looking back was all performative, but it doesn't matter. They did this 13 years ago now, and it's still one of the most iconic things to happen to MMORPGs ever. It led to decisions like Blizzard releasing Classic WoW, maybe not directly, but I have to imagine that Old School existing really helped WoW Classic gain the momentum it needed to exist. Obviously, this experiment comes with risks. I think Old School came with a lot of risk too, not just for Jagex, but for the players of RuneScape 2. But I still think it was a worthy experiment to run, and this one was a massive success. I'm not saying that Project Zanaris is going to be anywhere near this level of success, but it's still going to be information either way on what this can do for MMOs and if it does more harm than good. And finally, I think that Project Zanaris will help flesh out suggestions. The suggestion I'm showing here is the Bard skill from Gentle Tractor, Caveman Only, and Screep Monge, which are all really, really iconic people in the Old School RuneScape community because they're not only extremely creative, but they're also really talented. And in this extremely long suggestion, they really flesh out what a skill, a new Bard skill, would look like in RuneScape. And it's awesome. It's worth a read. It's unfortunately probably not going to happen. This is a decently old suggestion at this point, but still, it's really awesome to see how they've worked everything out. And they really have worked so much of the skill idea out. But what if they had a way to implement some sort of Bard skill into the game through community servers? What I'm saying here is a stretch. That needs to be put out very plainly. With the way they describe community servers right now, doing something like the Bard skill wouldn't be possible. But I do know that if this idea was any amount of success for Jagex, they would expand on it. I really, really believe and actually know they would expand on it if this went well. It's called business. Look it up. So I don't think it's a huge stretch to imagine a couple years down the road, you could add your own skills. I don't know to what extent you could add them or what level of control you'd have over them, but I think you could add new bosses, new items, all kinds of stuff to flesh out suggestions. Skill was probably a bad example because they're so big, but we often see examples for people suggesting new rewards from bosses or new bosses entirely, and that's a really cool idea to put on paper. But what if you could test out those boss mechanics in your own server? That would be awesome, and then players could try out your suggestion, see if it actually feels good, and at that point, there's even more incentive for Jagex to listen because there will be evidence instead of just yellow text on a black background. Again, this is a stretch. This really assumes that private servers take off and Jagex expands the tools available on those servers, because I expect when it comes out, the tools are going to be somewhat limited. But still, I think there's a lot of creativity that can come from a limited tool set. Look at RuneLite plugins. RuneLite plugins are actually really limited in what they can do. It's how developers use the tools that are in RuneLite to make stuff happen. Like Prop Hunt was never an intended thing to have inside of RuneLite, but all of the APIs available made it possible for me to make that. Or if you look at the Creator Kit plugin on RuneLite, that is just mind-blowing, the level of control it gives you in the game. But again, it's stuff that a developer had to figure out with the tools that were available. So even limited tooling that is going to be on these private servers, I think could lead to some really cool results and hopefully eventually the expansion of the tools in the private servers. So all in all, to wrap up the pros of this idea, I think it's a great experiment to see how the MMORPG community reacts and ultimately see if this is something that could be used not only for creativity and suggestions, but maybe even preservation of certain time periods of RuneScape if we get that ability. It's also a huge idea. It's a massive idea, and it has a lot of implications, so there are plenty and plenty and plenty of cons. One of the cons I think of most immediately is the fact that this has a chance of fracturing the player base. This is the point I've seen probably the most often from players as well, and it's one that is not a unique concern, but a valid one. I think back to when Old School RuneScape servers were being polled, there was a lot of concern, not only from the community, but even the developers, that this would fracture the RuneScape community. Because now all of a sudden you have not one game to choose from, unless you were one of the few hundred people playing RuneScape Classic, but you have two. And what if a significant amount of people move to that second game? Does the first game die? Vice versa? It was a concern. And honestly, it's a concern that has, in a way, come to pass. The player base is really fractured between Old School RuneScape and RuneScape 3. It's kind of rare to see people who genuinely play both. But RuneScape 3 is still thriving. They're getting updates all the time. The community there has a lot to like. They have all the same complaints that any other MMORPG player would have. It's not the perfect game. Neither is Old School RuneScape. Neither is World of Warcraft. Neither is any MMO. But both games are alive. But the community was separated. Was there a lot of harm from it? Not really, because there's only two games and they both have a lot of players. So things are still good here. But look at World of Warcraft, which I think is starting to have the issue of too many options fracturing the community. You have obviously retail World of Warcraft, which just had the War Within expansion. Then you could also go play Cataclysm Classic, which is the latest expansion to Classic. So you have retail and then you have Cataclysm Classic. But They also still have WoW Classic Era, which is vanilla World of Warcraft from 2004, just sitting there, still in a state able to play. So you have 3 versions: Retail, Cataclysm Classic, and Classic Era. But inside of Classic Era, there's even more division. There's Hardcore. These are separate servers that if you die on them, you die in real life. Wait, no, hold on. If you die on these servers, your character is just permanently dead. You can transfer to a Era server, but as far as your Hardcore server journey is, that's over. And then you also have Season of Discovery, which is a seasonal server, but again, separate server where there's crazy stuff going on. I'm not going to go into detail about what Season of Discovery is. So in essence, you have 5 versions. Yeah, you have 5 versions of World of Warcraft you can choose to play to different extents of how different they are. That's a lot. And there are a ton of World of Warcraft players. Trust me, they're not lacking for subscribers and for players. It's not a huge deal, but I can tell you, as someone who still plays Classic Era all the time, just the vanilla base World of Warcraft, there are much fewer players than there were even a year ago because Hardcore didn't exist and Season of Discovery didn't exist. And Wrath of the Lich King, which was the expansion before Cataclysm, was kind of starting to taper off at that point. Cataclysm Classic is still somewhat recent. So we are seeing the effects of a fractured player base. With community servers, you're going to have a ton more servers to choose from. Not 5. You could have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. And I do think that is a fair concern to have. But I think you have to consider what community servers are going to do and what need they're going to fill. Old School Runescape filled a need that was completely unique. The desire to go back to a simpler version of RuneScape that didn't have all the new combat, which was the big one that RuneScape 3 had, or all the new skills and the microtransactions and all that. It was something completely different, and it was the only option. So if anyone wanted to experience that, they had to go here. Same for World of Warcraft Classic, to be honest. Community servers aren't going to provide that level of difference from the main game of RuneScape. Yeah, you'll be able to do like buffed XP rates, region locking, stuff I've already talked about, but it's, at least in its current state, not going to be able to provide servers that can hold thousands of players that bring RuneScape back to how it was in 2004. That might change. Eventually we might get those tools and the server capacity, but I would be really surprised by that. But as it stands now, they're not going to be these things that I think people will choose to play consistently over Old School RuneScape. But that's an opinion. This is part of what I think the Project Zanaris experiment will tell us. Is it damaging the main game? That's scary, because if the answer is yes, which I don't think it will be, I don't think it's going to take a significant amount of players from the main game, then we have a problem, because then Jagex is getting more money for Project Zanaris, and maybe support falls off for Old School RuneScape. Slippery slope. It's scary, but I think that's a few logical leaps down the road. I don't think we need to worry about that right now. And B, I also think the quality of these servers compared to World of Warcraft Classic or Old School RuneScape or Cataclysm Classic or any of these other versions that are officially developed by these companies, it's just not going to be on the level that players are going to want to invest significant time in most of the time. They're mostly going to be gimmicks for events, or for if you see your favorite YouTuber try out a new challenge and you're like, I want to try out that challenge. Maybe someone's running a server that is based around that challenge. Awesome. You can log in, you can do that. But you're ultimately, I think, going to wind up going back to the main game. I see some people talk about how it could have a similar effect to what Leagues has on the main RuneScape servers. In case you're unaware, but I don't know why you're watching this far into the video and don't know what Leagues are temporary seasonal game modes for Old School RuneScape that have all sorts of restrictions and XP rate buffs and cool stuff. The main point is it's separate servers and seasonal. And it's true that Leagues pull a significant amount of players away from the main game, and then even after they wrap up, the player count goes down for a little bit because there's a burnout. There's a post-Leagues burnout. And with these community servers, you could make League-like mechanics, but the post-League burnout usually happens because Leagues start at one time on these centralized servers with, again, the quality and backing of an actual video game development company. Community servers will have League-like mechanics scattered around and in varying degrees of quality. I don't think it's going to have the impact that people think it will if they think it's going to have a similar impact to Leagues. I don't think we're going to be looking at something like that. I could be wrong, but again, that's a few logical leaps down the road. But then there's the opposite side of the coin, What if this is actually a massive failure? Like, no one wants to play on community servers. Maybe there's just a lack of tools that make it interesting enough, or just, the community, the player base decides, yeah, this isn't really of interest to us, which is totally possible. I think, first of all, that's cool. We get more information about the industry and the community, and we find out that this is not a way that the community needs to innovate. And that's fine. We get more information. But there is the fact that then Jagex spent time and, most importantly, money and humans, like actual human resources, on an idea that fell completely flat, because it was announced that they hired a whole new team to work on Project Zanaris. The reason they announced it like that was because they didn't want players to think that the dev team, like the actual content team, was spending their time on this. Like, we're not going to get new RuneScape updates, like new raids or new bosses, because of this project. That is not the case. But it has led to some concern. For example, the fact that they hired a whole new team for this, but there's no customer support team, which I understand as a frustration. It's not super valid, because that's not how businesses work, but I understand it, because that is still money spent on hiring that didn't go to customer support, which in RuneScape, in case you don't know, is famously really, 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 really bad. Like, actually disgustingly terrible. The thing I immediately thought of, and that a commenter also thought about, so credit to you, Benos the Great, is that you can't monetize customer support, you can private servers. And that's true. Private servers has a direct value proposition for Jagex. They will make money on this. They might not make a lot, but the chances are that they're going to make a lot. Like, they're going to be renting servers. At least in the first month, people are going to want to try them out. They're going to make a good amount of money. And if the idea succeeds, they're going to make a lot of money. Customer support doesn't make direct money. I think having good customer support means you have good brand recognition, and therefore people will want to give you more money. But that's like a very... I don't even know how to put it. That's a very happy idea. And that's not always how things work out. So I'm not saying I justify this decision. Like, I'm not saying, oh, I'd rather have Project Zanaris than customer support. I'm just telling you how Jagex is, the higher ups at Jagex are looking at this. And at the same time, I don't want to just shit on every idea that comes out of Jagex because there's no customer support. Like, I don't think it's a one or the other kind of situation. I can be, and we can be, excited about this and what it could mean without being depressed that we still don't have customer support. I think these are two different issues that can be handled separately, and one doesn't need to fight the other. But I totally understand how your mind could go to that. And I I think it's a totally understandable argument. I just think it's one that's you're grasping at straws for why to be angry at this idea, in my opinion. There's better reasons to be concerned. And one other concern I've seen that I actually touched on at the beginning was the fact that player design minigames, like Ingus says, Ingus, if you don't know, is a very, very talented and big content creator for Old School RuneScape. He talks about player design minigames like Prop Hunt. Hey, I made Prop Hunt. That's me, which are RuneLite plugins. He says those are better than community servers. I don't get this. I don't understand this. Because, first of all, RuneLite plugins aren't going anywhere. Those are still there. They will exist. They're not getting outlawed or anything because of this. But also, player design minigames, in theory, only get enhanced by community servers. Because in community servers, you have maybe not more control right now than RuneLite plugins, because RuneLite plugins can do a lot, but you have a different type of control. You have access to different tools. So therefore, you have access to making more mini games, and players can design more. But I also separately don't understand why we're comparing them, because to me, these are ideas that kind of are hand in hand. One helps the other. If people weren't interested in player design minigames like Prop Hunt and Escape Rooms, which are a type of video series that were getting pretty popular about a year ago, there wouldn't be community servers. If it wasn't for RuneLite plugins and minigames and content creators doing these crazy challenges like region locking themselves, we wouldn't be getting community servers. These ideas are intrinsically connected to me. So I don't really understand why we would be comparing them, but even if we are, one is not taking away from the other. players can still design their own mini games on the main servers and make plugins and all that. So that is, I don't, I don't get this one, but I don't want to put Ingus on blast here. I have seen this from a few other people. It's just something I thought needed to be addressed because this is enhancing, not taking away from. So that, that's good. So all in all, I don't think Project Zanaris is going to harm the main game in any significant way. My main question is it going to be successful? Just as an idea, as a concept, because I hope it is. I don't hope it takes away people from the main game in a significant way, but I hope it's successful in a way that Jagex continues investing in it, because I think this is a great way to expand on the ideas of MMORPGs. And I love MMORPGs. Shocker. I know, very surprising. But when I say that, what I'm really saying is that I love grinding for a long time, not in a sexy way. I like the fact that in World of Warcraft Classic, it takes me fucking years to get to level 60 because I can't focus on one class at a time. Or in RuneScape, the fact that I've had the same character for 6 years now and he's still not even close to maxed. I like the time investment that these games take. I like the journey. These servers are just a different way to experience MMOs. Just almost like whether I want to take a break or just try something new. I think it's just a good thing. Again, I don't know for sure if that's how the community will receive it when they're actually out and in our hands and we're trying them out. But I hope it opens up a new avenue for us to experience these games. And that's why I'm very pro Project Zanaris. And I think if anyone's having extreme negative thoughts and feelings about Project Zanaris, I get it, but give it time. Give it at least until it's released and you can try it out. And if you still hate it, I understand. But maybe you won't. Maybe you'll like it, and maybe we'll all live happily ever after. Anyway, Jagex, this background tile's really ugly over here. But that's it. Goodbye. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my slop. Mwah.